Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 1986 film Night of the Creeps. And going into this, I couldn't remember if I've actually seen this film before, but it's been a long time, or I've never actually seen this movie before. And actually watching the beginning portion of it, I was like, this is definitely familiar, but it's been a long time. I'm talking like over 10 years. And I just didn't remember a whole lot from it, just like a piece here or there. I remember the space slugs because, let's be honest, very memorable. And I also remembered Tom Atkins because also very memorable. Space slugs, Tom Atkins, probably the two most memorable things other than the fact that this is an interesting take on zombies, actually, which you don't find that often in any decade, honestly. It's usually like very straightforward zombies that are usually like toxic sludge or who knows what. But the whole space slugs thing, definitely an interesting twist that I enjoyed. Written and directed by Fred Dekker, who also did The Monster Squad, which we all love, RoboCop 3, and also involved in writing 1985 Godzilla, the film House, the one from the 80s, not the Japanese one from the 70s, Ricochet, Starship Enterprise show, and The Predator. Yes, the 2000s The Predator, which I have not seen. Wait, if that was the one with Lawrence Fishburne, yes, I did see that one, and I thought that one was pretty good. Or was that Predators? Not sure. Anyway, reportedly, a lot of the film was actually shot at an old Woolworths store that was then turned into a studio. If people remember Woolworths stores, I do from when I was very young, like 90s primarily. But I would be interested to know if there are actually any Woolworths still in operation at this point. Probably not. Or at least any store spaces still just standing. Tom Atkins has stated before that this was his favorite film he's been in, which I can see why. It's a fun character. It's a badass character. It appears from how his performance comes across on the screen that he was excited about the role. Like, he threw a lot into it and did a really good job with it. So I'm very happy with his performance in this. That's one of the reasons I was saying he's one of the most memorable things about the film. So supposedly Dekker wanted to shoot the whole film in black and white. I assume the producers were kind of like, we don't really want to do that because black and white is kind of a hard sell once you start hitting like 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. You know, every now and then you get a film that'll go back to it and it works, something like Mallrats. I'm sorry, not Mallrats, Clerks. I'm getting my Kevin Smiths mixed up, but I guess there was a bit of a compromise where he talked them into doing the 50s portion of the film in the beginning in black and white, which I think has a cool feel to it. I also feel like it does a really good job of separating the two portions of the story because it's kind of like this is what happened in the past and it was in the 50s. So obviously, like a lot of the films from the 50s, it's in black and white. I just think it gives it a fun, interesting, cool, artsy aspect to it. And then we go to color once it hits 1986. So I like that about it. Apparently, Dekker was asked at one point why the character of JC is handicapped, and he responded that he can have people who are handicapped, and the character is not actually just about the handicap. So kind of ahead of his time in that situation, because during this time period, the majority of films that were being done with people who had handicaps had to do with that being something very important to the film. Either they have to overcome something because of their handicap and become some sort of hero, or they have a handicap so it's kind of covering up truly what type of character they are. So a lot of times, you know, a villain would end up being handicapped, and it's because of their handicap that it turns them into a villain somehow. Or they become kind of the unsuspecting, you know, killer or villain within a film because, oh, they're handicapped, so you just assume that they would be more benign and not actually be involved in being evil or, you know, anything like that. So very refreshing to hear that Dekker thought that way when he was making the film. So getting in the actual film, I do like the very slow kind of creation of the opening title and that really kind of ethereal, dread-filled music that plays. By the way, very sorry about the dog once again. My neighbors are very inconsiderate in my neighborhood. Yeah, there's nothing I can do. So we're going to soldier on through this one. But the ethereal, like, dread-filled music that actually feels like it has a bit of like a sci-fi tinge to it, I think is really cool. It goes really well with the kind of slow reveal of that title. and it just looks cool. So the music added to that just kind of completes the experience, in my opinion. And then going to the whole opening scene with these, space creatures, which I don't know, are they calling those creeps? I don't know. But the space creatures having that pursuit where the one is kind of stealing that pod that ends up on, planet Earth, and then that's how the space slugs get out. That music kind of tying it to that with that little bit of a sci-fi feel makes a lot of sense. But I do have to say that the beginning is certainly odd with that kind of space scene. But it does actually kind of give me a little bit of a Critters vibe, I thought. And then when I started thinking that and I made that note, I went and checked. I'm like, what year did the first Critters come out? 1986, same year. So I don't think it was inspired by Critters or anything like that. It just so happens that it gives me a Critters feel, and they happen to come out in the same year. So that's cool. It is a cool idea to do the first portion of the film in the 50s in black and white, and it does help separate that portion of the film from the rest of the film, obviously. I do think maybe it would have been interesting if in the 80s, when at that portion where Cameron, Atkins' character, was having that kind of like mixture flashback and premonition nightmare, if they would have made that in black and white because it was kind of from that time period, or maybe that portion in black and white that was actually tying to that, and then the portion that was actually partially premonition that was kind of rooted in the now in 1986, maybe have that portion color. I think that could have been a really cool dichotomy and served more to kind of hint the audience to this is stuff that actually happened that is a nightmare for him that he's continually reliving. And this is the stuff that hasn't happened yet that he's kind of having this sixth sense about. I do love the fact that they throw in Corman University in there. Obviously, a very nice nod to Roger Corman. Additionally, characters in this have last names of Cronenberg, Romero, and Hooper, because obviously David Cronenberg, George A. Romero, and Tobe Hooper. Very cool. I love seeing in these films like those types of nods to other filmmakers of the time. Just super fun. I love it. You're very intrigued to see how the portion from the 50s in the beginning is actually going to tie into the 1986 portion. And obviously, it really doesn't end up taking too long to get to that, with the character of Johnny being cryogenically frozen, and for some reason at a college in a basement. I don't know. That whole setup, like the whole like scientific setup type thing with all the lights and everything. It's just funny to look at that because in the 80s when that came out, people were like, yes, it looks very like futuristic, science-y, computery. And now you look at it and just kind of like, looks kind of ridiculous. But hey, that's what happens over time. JC is very outgoing and confident as a character. He is a very fun character. I really did like him as well. And he's obviously there as a character to really not just be a friend to Chris, and then also eventually get that information to him about how the creeps, I'm just calling them space slugs, how the slugs are killed. But he's also there to really push Chris out of his comfort zone as a friend. Obviously, Chris is more kind of afraid of approaching Cindy and afraid of kind of looking out of place or seeming like, not just seeming like he doesn't belong, but like embarrassing himself to a degree. JC has very much embraced who he is. He's a kind of over-the-top personality, but he's also very confident in who he is, and he's not going to take crap from anyone. And he really tries to imbue that in Chris as well, and I really think that by the end of the film, you do at a certain point kind of see a fusing of the characters of JC and Chris into Chris himself, to make him a better person. Like, that's what JC contributed to him throughout the course of the film. He made him a more confident person. It's like he literally, when JC dies, Chris literally takes the best traits from JC and adopts them himself, kind of like as an homage to him, as a way to pay tribute to him, taking his own life, basically, because he knows he's infected with these slugs at that point. With how the frat guys act in this film, it actually makes you wonder, is the title about them? Are they the creeps? And I would argue that that may actually be the case in this, because if you think about it, you could think about the space slugs as the creeps, yes. You could think about the aliens as the originating creeps, and maybe the space slugs are kind of like somewhat their offspring or something. I don't know for sure. A sequel would have probably told us, but that didn't happen. And then you really see, though, that the frat guys really are creeps, because the way they did those characters, they're very... there's a certain word I want to use, but I don't want to use that word because I just don't see a real need to do it. They're jerks. They're not great people. They make fun of people. They treat women like objects. They're very mean to Chris and JC. They send them on that fool's errand in order to then just make fun of them about it, because they never had any intention of letting them into the frat in the first place. They even say that. So it really does lead me to believe that the frat guys are the actual creeps within this film. And then when the two things come together, the slugs and the creeps, they're like the super creeps in essence. That's my feeling. With how ornery JC has been within this film, you actually get a feeling that he's going to end up somehow setting Johnny free from his cryogenic state. And yes, that obviously happens. I'm sure almost everyone in the audience sees that coming because of how they set up the character of JC as just being like, let's just do stuff, let's not think too hard about it. Early on, you see a very quick shot of the slug things, and it really does make you want to see more. And it also makes you wonder, like, are you going to see them better at some point? Or is it going to continue to just be this thing where maybe the props didn't look that great, so they just kind of did, like, very quick takes throughout the entire film? But no, you actually do end up seeing them better. And yeah, I think the reveal at the very end with that kind of like hole in the wall that's just filled with them and it's all like writhing, which looks like it was potentially done, at least in parts, as like stop motion animation. That's really cool. And that's kind of like a bit more of a payoff of seeing more of it, which I love. The nightmare Cameron actually has, like I said, is kind of a mix of the past and the future being a premonition. And you can kind of like watch through it and just pick those parts together, or pick those pieces apart and see which is which. But like I said, doing it in partial black and white and partial color would have been excellent. It appears that Johnny still has some of his memories as he goes to the sorority house in search of Pam. When he's first taken out of his cryogenic state, he goes to the sorority house because when he was infected initially, the last thing is he was on a date with Pam. So he was thinking most likely about Pam when that occurred. So then, obviously, he goes to what he knows and he goes back there. Obviously, he then kind of dies because his head splits open and all the space slugs just drip out and go and cause havoc. So, but there's a little bit of him still left, and I think maybe that was thrown in there to kind of make you believe that later on when JC leaves his audio message on that tape cassette, or on that cassette tape, that was possible, because there was still like a portion of Johnny in his brain, so it would make sense that there was still a portion of JC in his own head. It's funny when JC says, "I'd rather have my brain invaded by creatures from space," when he's referring to not wanting to actually be part of a fraternity, because that's kind of like a little chuckle, a little nod to the audience, because the audience knows at that point, like, that is actually what's occurring in this film. So it's just kind of a funny line that I enjoy. Man, Gordon the cat looks really nasty the second time you see him. Obviously, the first time you see him, it's supposed to be like, it's a little bit of like oh no, is something going to go wrong? And it's like, oh no, it's just this girl's cat, Gordon. And then the next time you see it, you're like, oh, it's potentially just Gordon. And then you see it's like all messed up. I think the worm coming out of the eye socket is a very nice touch, very gross, very disturbing. So they did a good job with that one. It's really cool sound design when JC's in the bathroom and you hear the janitor come into the bathroom, I think walk a few steps, fall over, the head explodes, and then you hear like the slugs starting to go places as you see that JC like opens the bathroom stall door and sees them, going everywhere. So really good sound design. It really stands out at that point in the film, and I really like moments like that in film. So very, very cool. I like it. As they kind of skitter away and hey, this is a very dangerous situation. JC ends up discovering that fire kills the slugs, so the audience knows this. But the audience is then thinking, when it looks like he's definitely doomed, how is this information going to end up finding its way to people who could actually use it? And that's when your answer is given much later, when the cassette tape is found by Chris, and he actually listens to it. Because at first I was like, how is someone else going to figure this out? So then when that cassette tape showed up, I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of a clever way to do it. I do like that. Because it then shows the sacrifice of JC as well. And then obviously, Chris ends up going and finding him like in the boiler room where he's, killed himself and these slugs along with him. I do like the twist of Cameron having buried the axe-wielding psycho from the 50s after he confesses it to Chris that this psycho, busts through the floorboards of this old woman's house, axe and all. And now okay, now we have something else in the mix. I mean, it's still kind of the same thing, but in addition to being a person possessed by these slugs, it's a person who we know was dangerous prior to that because they were an axe-wielding psycho. So it just adds another extra element of fun and danger to the film. So here's a question. Do the slugs actually go dormant if the person who was the initial host is either dead or in a cryogenic state? Because the idea is there that when Johnny is frozen in that cryogenic state, the slugs inside of that axe-wielding psycho are dormant because he remains buried. And then once they're active again is when he comes back to life. So I assume that kind of like the initial infection, it's kind of like a vampire situation where like vampires, if you can take out the initial vampire, then it cures everyone else of vampirism. That's kind of what it seems like to me. So I don't know. Anyone has any thoughts, put it in the comments. Chris listening to the tape that JC left, I think is a very good scene. It actually has a lot of impact to it. And I think that the actor who played JC at that point did a really good job with delivering those lines and making it mixed with like kind of this detached aspect of it from being in a bit of a zombie state, but also having bits of sorrow in the voice because he knows like this is the end as he kind of takes care of what he needs to. And speaking of acting, the part where Jason Lively, who plays Chris, goes and tells Cameron that JC is dead and he's kind of like sobbing, not good acting. And in general, Jason Lively, I don't think did a very good job in this. Now, I can see where some people would be like, yes, but that is kind of what adds a little bit of extra so bad it's good flavor to the film. So I can see that for sure. But for me, I was just kind of like, don't really love that. Would have liked to see someone else in that role. Dick Miller sighting in this film. Let's talk about that. Very much not an uncommon thing to see in 80s films because Dick Miller was in a ton of stuff. And anyone who was tied to Roger Corman, any Roger Corman films, or anyone who wanted to pay homage to Roger Corman, probably wanted Dick Miller to show up in their film. And he is such a great character actor. You can tell he has fun with all his roles, and that's on display within this film, thankfully. You know exactly what's coming when the slug-infected dog climbs into the overturned frat bus. Like, that's one of those moments where they don't need to show what's happening because you've already seen enough about what happens with these slugs. You know that that dog is infected, and you see it just go in there, and then they cut to something else, and you're like, yep, I know what's coming. And it kind of makes you a little bit excited because you're like, here come a ton of, infected people, which leads to the kind of like big fight towards the end of the film. It is a cool scene when camera shoots Brad in the head and Chris torches his face as the slugs pop out. Maybe one of the best scenes in the film, in my opinion. I really do love that moment. Practical effects really coming to the forefront and shining. And it's just a fun concept as well. Again, sorry about the dog. I cannot do anything about it. I love Atkins' delivery of this line. I got good news and bad news for you girls. The good news is your dates are here. The bad news is they're dead. Again, I mean, if you would point to like one moment in this film that shows you that Atkins probably had a really good time with this role, I think that line delivery might be it. But you can see it throughout, really. I mean, that's just a great explanation, or a great example of it. So, seeing the pictures of Pam in the sorority house gives Cameron the focus and motivation to pull together and overcome that horde of creeps that he's fighting. That is kind of the pivotal moment when the big hero is down and it looks really bad for him. But he sees the picture of Pam hanging on the wall. he used to have a relationship with her, and you know, you get the idea that he never got past or never got over her, over losing her, and he kind of, you know, peps up, jumps up, and gets the motivation and the focus to take out all these creeps and get the job done. They missed a prime opportunity, I do think, to make that lawnmower scene really awesome. Practical effects wise, that could have been amazing when Chris uses the lawnmower to take out that one creep that was there. I really do like the idea of that scene, but again, they missed a great opportunity to do something awesome. And I get the impact they're going for with Cameron sacrificing himself at the end, but he could have lit that thing and run. I'm sure I'm not the only people who saw that, but I will say also, when I thought about it further, it very well could be a situation where he's just kind of done. You know, he's been running all his life. He's been having these nightmares, really PTSD to a degree, and this is his resolution, and he's like, I'm checking out. This is a way to go. And obviously, it's not the way he wanted to, because he ends up getting infected at the very end before everything gets taken care of. But then that is obviously what sets up the whole premise for a sequel. Although I like that. I like that, you know, they bust out of his head at the end and kind of go into that cemetery. But then showing the spaceship there, I'm kind of like, I don't really think we needed that. I think it would have been better if you just show the slugs going to the cemetery, and then it kind of cuts there, and people are like, oh no, here we go. Here we go again. So, yeah. Overall, I enjoyed the film. Out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm going 3.5 stars on this one. Again, I'm very, very sorry for the barking dog. Hopefully, it wasn't really picked up. Can someone let me know, were you hearing this barking dog at intermittent times throughout this? Let me know in the comments. That would help me in the future, because I can maybe adjust my audio settings, but it is very frustrating to have to deal with this, unfortunately. But 3.5 stars for Night of the Creeps. I would love to hear other people's opinions on this one, good, bad, in between, and just give me like a sentence or two of why you do or don't like it in the comments. I would appreciate that. And yeah, hit that subscribe button to my channel if you haven't already. I greatly appreciate it when people subscribe. It is your best way to support me and say thank you for all these free videos I'm putting out there. And hit the notification bell button, because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing for a week. Regardless, I thank you very much for taking your time to watch this particular video, and until next time, keep it brutal.